Hindsight is an interesting thing. Hindsight is the ability to understand something once it's passed. It's often difficult when you're in the middle of a storm or a trial to be able to understand the reason why you're there. Typically, when we're in the middle of a circumstance or an experience or a situation that we don't want to be in, we're asking questions, but we don't know why we're there. We don't know why we're experiencing the pain or the situation or why it's happening to us. Not too long ago, I had this really fun food poisoning time. How many of you have ever had food poisoning in here? Listen, I think there's extra rewards for us in heaven because that thing is just terrible. So I was working out with my dad in the gym, and we had finished. It was around 3 p.m., and the only thing that I'd eaten all day was a Starbucks chocolate shake. I thought, Starbucks, great restaurant. I got a little shake, and I took it. It's about 30 minutes after me and my dad were in the gym, and we're working out, and we're only about 20 minutes into the workout, and I start feeling like this queasy feeling in my stomach. And I thought, well, I'm just probably working out harder than them. That's probably why I didn't feel anything. And so this started to get worse, and I got to a point where I said, I don't know, my stomach's getting worse. I just don't think I'm going to work out. I think I'm going to be done with the workout. And he goes, okay, I'll be done too. So we head home, and I remember specifically the day because it was the day that the Cubs won the World Series. All the Sox fans are straight-faced right now. I don't clap for that. So I was there, and the Cubs were playing later that night, so we were going to have some people come over. We were going to eat some pizza, watch the game. And it's about 4 o'clock now. My stomach is just getting worse. And there's a moment, when you're getting sick, there's a moment that you just start to feel like, okay, this is beyond just the stomach, and this is about to come out. So I don't know about you, but I absolutely hate throwing up. There's some people who can do it, and it's like not a big deal. That's my sister. I'm the complete opposite. You want to see me at my lowest point? Get me to throw up, and I'm just totally a mess. So I'm there, and it finally gets to that point. I can feel it. I'm fighting it. I'm like, Lord, come on, Lord, please. Mercy, please, Lord. Just this one time. Pass it out to someone else. And I'm on the toilet, and I just start like a waterfall. Just like, psh, psh. I'm like, oh, my goodness. And I'm in the bathroom. The first hour goes by. Still continuing. 3 hours go by. This thing is like nonstop. I cannot believe this is happening to me. 5, 6 hours go by. The Cubs game is starting. People are playing. I'm at a point, you're strong, you're trying to fight it. I'm at a point where I'm hugging the toilet, holding on. I'm at that point like, Lord, what is happening? No more. Became far too familiar with the insides and outsides of that toilet. And so I'm asking him, what's going on? What's the game? And I'm throwing them. This went on for 8 hours from 4 to 12. It was constant. It was terrible. And you get to a point when you're in the middle of your suffering or your experience that you don't want to be in. There's a moment there where you start asking God, like, why is this happening to you? You get real theological when you get sick. God, why me? And why is this happening? And why won't you let this pass? And what is the purpose and the reason for this happening? And why is this happening? And why is this going on? And, a lot of times you are experiencing the pain, you want to get out of it, but you also want to know the reason why you're having it. And I realized later that I had this food poisoning and that this process of throwing up, although disgusting and terrible and not fun to do, it was actually a process that it felt bad, but in the end, it brought good. Because my body wasn't supposed to have that in there, and so this was the natural process for my body to get this poison from me, and in the end, it brought about good, even though the whole time it felt bad. See, it's interesting that life seems to be the same way many times. that you're in an experience, you're going through something, life seems to be unraveling. You get to a point where you're pushing on and you're holding on so long. You get to a point you're saying, God, why is this happening? Why me? What did I do? Why is this why is it still going on? What's the purpose of this pain? Why is it happening? You get to that point. And it seems like we want answers. It seems like we want a break. But sometimes in life, we don't get the answer till we're out of the season or the pain is over. The story that we will talk about today is about Joseph. This was a man who experienced, if I experienced even half of the things in his life, I don't know what I would do. This is a man who was hated by his brothers, sold into slavery by his own family. They thought that was a better choice than murdering him. Then he becomes a prisoner, is a prisoner in an Egyptian prison for years. And out of all that garbage and all that happens in his life, God raises him up to be the second most powerful man in the nation of Egypt, which is the most powerful nation in the world. And he says this, after going through all of that, being sold into slavery, being betrayed, being hated, he says this at the end of the whole story. He says, you intended to harm me. Talking to the people that hurt him and wronged him. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. I want to throw an idea out this morning, and I want you to chew on it and think about it. Is it possible that although the season you're going through or some of the things you've experienced in your life might be terrible and you might not wish it upon anybody else? You might hate that it's part of your story. You might not stand that it's like, this is part of who you are and it's kind of shaped who you are. But is it possible that even though that's in your life, that God can use that, even though the process and the system and the years feels painful, long, and bad, is it possible that God can, in his infinite power, use what is wrong, bad, and painful in your life to bring about good in your life in the end? So in Joseph chapter 37, I want to tackle that question. I want to wrestle with that. I don't have a bunch of lessons here. I only have 2 lessons that I really want to share with you this morning from the life of Joseph. There's far less people in the Bible than Joseph that have experienced more pain than him. So when we're going through a season, number 1, I want us to understand that God can use flawed and broken people to change the world. The story starts off in verse 3. It says, now Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he had been born to him in his old age. And he made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. I don't know if growing up in your household, there was kind of like fights between the siblings. Maybe, older brother, younger brother, kind of jealousy, fighting. Even with me and Grant. Grant's always, even when he was really young, he was always trying to fight me and kind of prove he was the tough guy in the house. And it's that little younger brother syndrome. But there's tension in families many times. In Joseph's family, he had 11 other brothers. That's not counting the sisters. He had 11 other brothers in his household, and his brothers hated him. I don't know if you come from a dysfunctional family, but Joseph came from a super dysfunctional family. The dad, Jacob, married both the sisters. So that causes a problem. And there was 11 sons. And so you think, well, Joseph, why did they hate Joseph so much? Well, part of the reason that they hated Joseph so much is that his dad got him this robe and favored him more than the other sons. That's like buying one of your kids the newest iPhone 10. You say, here, son, I love you so much. You're the best son. I want you to carry this, and I want you to have this phone on you. I got it special. It's engraved with your name on the back. It's your favorite color. Here's the new iPhone 10. And then you give your other 5 kids just the flip phone. You say, here, listen, this is for you. I like him more, so I'm going to give him the iPhone 10, but you get a flip. This is nice, though. You could flip, and you're like, think about that. That every time Joseph came into the house for a meal, he's wearing a robe and his clothes are saying, I'm better than you. Every time he walks out, he's among the field with his brothers and he's wearing his coat says, Dad loves me more than he does you. I mean, think about the problems that causes in a family, that this dude's wearing a jacket that basically says on the back, I'm better than you and God loves me, Dad loves me more than you. I mean, it caused major family tension in Joseph's home. And his brothers, because of it, hated him. Hated him. The one wife had 6 sons. Rachel, the second wife, had 2 sons. And the maids had 2 sons each. 12 boys, 4 different mothers, 2 wives. I mean, it sounds like a modern day reality show. Jacob's boys, the other 11, were out of control. His oldest son, Reuben, slept with the stepmother. His other 2 sons, because one of their sisters was raped, they went and killed the entire village and pillaged everything that they had. And Jacob's 2 wives that he had, the 2 mothers, were bitterly fighting for Jacob's attention and his love in the home. This is the setting that Jacob grew up in. This is the setting that Joseph grew up in. I don't know if it's similar to the setting you grew up in. Maybe there was divorce or infidelity and brokenness, fights in the house. Maybe there was a situation where you look at the brokenness, you think, I never want my family to be like that, but maybe that's even what you're repeating in your own home right now. See, we repeat what we know. And if Joseph was to start his own family, he would repeat a dysfunctional, broken family because that's all he knew. A family where there's favoritism and brokenness and jealousy and hatred, and that's what he knew. And yet, to make things worse, God gave this guy some special dreams. So in the first dream that Joseph has, and let me preface this with this. I know a lot of us have dreams, right? How many of us had a dream last night that you could remember? I know a lot of us have dreams. Let me start the story off. Joseph has dreams. Not every dream that we have is a dream from God. Can I say that? I know you had this dream about there was a tree and there was a bird that was flying and it hit the window and then it died and you're like, what does that mean for my life? It's probably just a dream about the movie you saw last night. It's probably not from God. Not every dream that we have is from God, but these 2 dreams that God gave Joseph were dreams not only about his life, but they were actually dreams of his future and what his future would be. He didn't know that at the moment, but his dreams were dreams of the future. So his first dream, he comes to his brothers and he says, hey, we were all out in the field and we all had a bundle of wheat. And all of you guys gathered around me and your bundles of wheat, they bowed down and my bundle of wheat stood tall. Listen, if there's already hatred and jealousy and bitterness, that's not the dream you want to tell your brothers. That's like saying, hey, I got 2 siblings. I go to my sister and my brother, hey, I had a dream last night and I don't know what it means, but there was an iPhone and you guys had 2 iPhones and then your iPhones bowed down to my iPhone. What do you think that means? Like, that's gonna cause some problems. That's the first dream that he has, and it says it added to the hatred. His brothers hated him even more because of this dream that he had. His second dream that he has, he says there's the sun and the moon. He has this dream where there's the sun and the moon, and there's these stars, and they're bowing down. They're showing reverence to him again. And his dad, he tells his dad and his brothers, and his brothers are like, whoa, we're gonna bow down to you, you're gonna rule us. And his dad says, me and your mother, we're gonna bow down? What is this? See, these weren't just dreams that he had because he read or he was growing up or his thoughts. These dreams were actually from God. These dreams would actually come true in the future where his brothers would later bow down to him as he became the most powerful man in Egypt. See, he didn't understand this in the moment, but God had planted a dream in his heart. What I love about God is this, and this is what I learned. And I was reading Joseph's story, and it starts in chapter 37, it doesn't end till around 50. But here's what's interesting that I learned about Joseph. That God could have used anybody, and yet he chose a kid from a dysfunctional family who was pretty prideful and foolish, and yet God still chose to use him to change the world. See, it's interesting, right? Because if you're God, I would look down and say, who's the perfect person from the perfect family who's never gonna fail and who's ready to set up for success? But that's not what God does. God seems to choose the broken person who's messed up from the broken, dysfunctional family, and he chooses to use him to change the entire world. And so what struck me about the thought is that's still how God works even today. That God looks among us, right? And we're not perfect people. This is a hospital for the broken and the hurting and the sick, right? And he looks for the people that are broken and that they don't have it all together and they're weak and they need God and they're relying upon him and they're humble. The ones that everybody else cast off and push off to the side, they're never gonna be anything, they're never gonna do anything. And God chooses those people, the ones, the outcasts, the ones everyone else pushes aside. God chooses to change the world through those types of people. I think we far too often discredit ourselves. We far too often discredit ourselves and belittle ourselves that God could never use somebody like me. God could never use somebody with my past. Oh, if only God knew how many people I slept around with. Man, I'm so dirty. God could never use somebody with me, the brokenness in my family and my home, the infidelity, the situations that happen. I don't even want to speak about. God could never use somebody like that. God could never use somebody with the past or the history or someone who does the things like that. God could never use me. I'm not. And yet what I read over and over and over and over in scripture is that God chooses the one that we would probably least choose. Right? He goes to David. He goes to David's household, and all his other brothers look like great kingly men. They look like kings, and yet God told Samuel, no, it's the youngest. It's David, the weakest. You go, David? That's the king? That's the guy? With Moses in Exodus chapter 3, God comes to Moses and says, Moses, you're the guy that I've chosen, put into place to speak to the most powerful nation on the world. I want you to speak to Egypt. I'm going to use you to change the worldview. I'm going to use you to change and set the Israelites free. And Moses goes, God, I'm nobody. Like, you have it wrong, God. You should have chosen somebody else. He literally says, I am nobody. You made a mistake, God. And it's interesting to me how God responds. He doesn't say, no, Moses, you're really, really strong. No, Moses, look at all the attributes I've given you. No, Moses, no, this or that. No. God says, no, I will be with you. See, what I've learned is this. Serving God and following God is a lot less to do with who I am and my abilities. And it's a lot more with who he is and what he can do. It's a lot less with who I am and what history and what background I have and my giftings that I have. It's a lot less to do with that. And it's a lot more to do with who God is, his strength, his abilities, his power, and what he can do through me. See, when we understand the difference between that, your life changes. Because it's not just about you. It's not just about what you can do in your own power. The things that we could do in the Spirit of God through his power and his strength are greater than everything that we could do in our own power. So he's looking for broken people. Moses was a stutterer. David was the runt of his family. And Joseph came from a dysfunctional family. And yet God still chose to use these people to change the face of the world. You say, well, why does God choose broken, feeble, weak people? Well, 1 Corinthians 1:27 says this, and here's our answer. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. What's he saying there? What he's saying is, in our weakness, in our inadequacies, in our failures, when everyone else looks like, hey, that can't be the person. And yet God uses you for things that you couldn't even have dreamed of in the future, only by his power and his strength. you bring him so much glory because everybody goes, this guy couldn't have done it in his own strength because he's too weak. It must have been God. See, when things happen and we're weak and people around us know, hey, that person couldn't have done that, but it's an automatic arrow that points to God. It wasn't this person, it was God that did it through them. See, in our weakness, why does God choose the broken and the weak, the dysfunctional for his glory and his honor? Because it's those people that God can use that bring him the most glory because people know it's not those people, it's actually God behind the scenes. God's glory is shown most clearly in our inadequacies and our weakness. Number 2, and last, God can use evil against us for our good. So the story continues on in chapter 37. Some time passes and Jacob sends Joseph. And he says, hey, Joseph, I want you to go check on your brothers down in the field. They're working. And so Joseph goes down to check on his brothers to see how they're doing, how the work's going. I don't know if he's a tattletailer or not. Snitches get stitches, but in verse 19, his brothers look at him, and this is their response. This is how much they hate their brother. The moment they see him coming off from a far distance, this is what they say. Here comes the dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. I mean, you gotta really hate somebody to want to kill them, right? This is your own brother, your own blood, and you hate this guy so much because your dad favors him and because of his dreams that you want to kill this dude, throw his body in a cistern, and take his clothes and say, hey, Dad, look what happened. Like, that's a lot of hatred you got to have for a dude. Their older brother says, hey, he's trying to save Joseph. He goes, hey, what if we just throw him in the cistern and whoa, you're in the cistern. And after Reuben leaves, his brothers keep scheming. Verse 26, Judah said to his brothers, what will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood. His brothers agreed. Because that's a lot better, right? Let's not murder him. Let's go sell him off to another nation. At this point in the story, if I was Joseph, put yourself in his shoes. Your family hates you. Your siblings absolutely hate you. They hate you so much that you're coming off from a distance. They take you, they throw you into a cistern, they sell you. Not only that, but they say, hey, let's not murder him. They sell you. They take your jacket, cover it with blood of an animal, show it to your dad, and he's grieving. How would you feel as Joseph in that situation? You've been betrayed. You've been literally sold into slavery. I mean, I can't even imagine the emotions and what he's going through in that moment of thinking, first of all, the betrayal, the hurt, the feelings he has there, but then also the hopelessness of where am I going? The fear of what happens next. I mean, this is what this guy went through at 17 years old. Some of you have kids that are 17 years old, and that's what Joseph went through. His brothers sold him off, and it seems like at this moment you'd say, wow, that's a terrible story. Don't make that into a Disney film. That's pretty dark. That's pretty gruesome. And yet what's interesting about the whole story is that Joseph is years later able to look back and say, those terrible events where my brothers betrayed me, sold me into slavery, I became a prisoner for years, I lost my life was controlled. Those years, God used for good. So here's the lesson we learned from that. God can use the evil, the brokenness, the things that you didn't ask for and you didn't want to happen in your life, but people did them to you. God can use the hurt that happens in your life, the brokenness, the things you perceive as evil or wrong. God can use that for his glory. See, in Genesis 50:20, when he talks about, hey, the things you said you did for evil, God has taken them and changed them for good. When you look at the words there, the Hebrew word is weave. So people bring evil into your life. They do evil things to you. They hurt you. Some things last longer than others. But what the verse is saying there is that God, even though evil people weave things into your life, God takes it and he reweaves it into something beautiful. There's a powerful concept there if we understand that. What's interesting is that sometimes the people that we love the most can hurt us the deepest. It was Joseph's own family, his own brothers, people he had grown up with that sold him into slavery. People that he loved and thought, these guys I spent my memories, these are my older brothers that I look up to. It was those people that betrayed and hurt Joseph the worst. Now, you look at your own life and you see the hurt and the pain and the circumstances that happen. What I'm not saying is I'm not saying that God made those things happen to you. God didn't force Joseph's brothers to hate him. God didn't force Jacob to favor Joseph over the rest of the brothers. God didn't force Joseph's brothers to sell him into slavery. God didn't force Potiphar's wife upon Joseph. God didn't do that. That was evil that evil people, right? That wrong people, that hurtful people did to Joseph's life. But instead of just allowing it to end in evil, what God does in our life is he takes the evil and it comes and he like rewinds it, rewires it, reweaves it, and it comes out and he can make even the most evil thing come out to be a benefit in your life. It's like some of these politicians when you see them debating. There's 10 or 12 of them on a stage. They get asked this really difficult question. You go, oh man, they got them. There's no way they're getting out of this question. What would you say about that scandal that happened to you? This, and they go, well, you know, scandals are bad, but we love children and children's schools are gonna go forward and we're gonna really do a lot for the kids. It's like, wait a minute. You didn't answer the question there. What are you gonna do about all the debt that you have in your state right now? Well, you know, debt's bad and this and that, but we're gonna use it and we're gonna really benefit our community and really bring it forward to a new level. And when you watch some of these guys, they're masters at taking something that somebody says, really changing it, rewiring it, reweaving it, and then it comes out to be something that benefits them. And God, in all his sovereignty, and God, in all his power, he's able. He didn't bring those things into your life to hurt you. He didn't do those things to ruin your life. People did that because we're broken, we're flawed, we're dysfunctional, we have sin. We have hearts that are selfish. You get a bunch of sick, sinful people together, what happens? People get hurt. We do wrong things. But God is even able to take all the wrong that's happened to us that we don't understand the purpose or the reason and why it's happened to us. God is able to take that, all the wrong that's happened to you that you don't understand. God is able to take that, not only and use it for his purposes, but use it for your good. Joseph's life of betrayal and hurt, jealousy, favoritism, being sold into slavery, it seems like at this point in the story, you would feel like, man, it seems like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. It seems all bad. But God was using even the brokenness. God was using these terrible, hurtful experiences to be able to mold Joseph into the guy he was, to be able to bring Joseph to Egypt. And in Egypt, God would give him one third dream, and this third dream would raise Joseph up to the power. He interpreted Pharaoh's dream. And Pharaoh said, he interpreted the dream, and Pharaoh said, you're gonna be the second most powerful man in all of Egypt. And Joseph at the end of that is saying, I get it now. I didn't understand why I had all that pain. But guess what? God was even using the pain and the brokenness to lead me to my future. God was using the hurt and the wrong and the betrayal and the loss. God was using that to lead me to somewhere. God was using that to shape me. God was using that to develop me. God can use even the brokenness, the terrible things, the evil that people have done to you. God can use that to benefit you, to grow you, and for his glory and his honor. So my question to you is this. Is there something in your life, in your past, where you look through the chapters, you flip through the pages? Is there something in your life that you look at as just evil and wrong, and you can't see any reason or purpose for why it happened, and maybe it shaped you. Maybe that one event has shaped you. But even though it shaped you, don't let it define your future. Even though your past has changed you and it explains the way that you are right now, don't let one event or two events or three events define who you will be in the future. Because if you could take a step back just for a moment, if you could have the God view from heaven and understand why these things happen, if you could take a step out of the trial, if you could take a step out of the pain and realize that maybe God, in all his power, in all his wisdom, is able to weave events of history for your benefit and for his glory. Because I believe that we serve a God that's big enough, that's great enough, that's grand enough to be able to even not just use the good in our life, but is even able to use the brokenness, the evil, the wrongs that other people have done to us for his glory and for his honor. I want to leave you with one verse. Jeremiah 29:11 says, I really want some of you to hear this. God says, for I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. He says, for I know the plans I have for you. He says, I have plans for your life. Even you feel like one day happens after another, God's saying, I got a bigger plan for your life. I have a purpose for your life. There's a reason why you're alive on this earth. There's a reason why you're breathing. There's a reason why you're still living. God says, I have a plan for you. Plans to prosper you, not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. See, God wants good in your life. God wants you to grow. God wants you to become all that you can be. And there's gonna be people in your life that are gonna try to tear you down. There's gonna be the enemy saying he's gonna try to tear you down, but God can use all of that. Don't let that stop you from becoming who God has called you to be. Allow that to be the pathway. So God, I understand. I don't understand everything. I don't understand it all. But I'm gonna trust. Here it is. I don't need to understand everything. I need to trust that you have a plan for my life and you're gonna work it out for your good and for my good. I don't need to know everything. Stop trying to figure out why everything's happened. There's certain things you will never know the reason for why they happen in your life. But our job is not to know why it's happening. Our job is to trust that God has a plan for our life and it's gonna lead to our good.